Why would we want rain? Wouldn't it be great to just have sunny days and to go to the beach or the park, to go outside every day? Wrong. There is a term that describes such an acute water shortage, and that is drought. Droughts are a lengthened period of dry time in a place that would otherwise have sufficient water. They are induced by a lack of precipitation and are a huge natural hazard in Australia, with results that will affect many aspects of living, including social, environmental, and economic aspects. Australia has one of the most variable climates on the planet, and it is these variations that bring about the hazard of droughts. Factors and processes contributing to these variations include the El Niño phenomenon and Australia's positioning on the globe. The El Niño is a natural occurrence that typically happens for about a year at a time. It warms the surface waters of the eastern Pacific Ocean and causes normally low-pressure areas such as Australia and Indonesia to increase and become high-pressure areas, preventing rain from reaching them. This is only one cause for droughts in Australia. Australia's geographical positioning is also a major factor. Australia is located right below the equator, where the temperature is still hot, but there are no torrential rains like in the wet season of the tropics, causing much of Australia to be arid desert and under constant threat of drought. This applies particularly to inland areas away from the coast, where there is often little chance of rain. Droughts can affect the economy, bringing down industries such as agriculture, which results in loss of jobs, which would in turn increase prices for products like timber, vegetables, and meats. During severe droughts in Australia, such as the drought of 1895, it has been recorded that as much as 40% of livestock have died. As you can imagine, this has severe impacts on the country's economy. It is not only livestock that is directly affected by drought, but crops too. Poor harvests from lack of water are common in times of drought. This results in the expensive importation of goods from other countries, which affects the income of Australian farmers and manufacturers. The lack of water itself can result in water restrictions to be placed on urban areas, which can cause many inconveniences for the general public. As can be seen from these few examples, droughts have vast economic impacts on Australia. As well as economic impacts, environmental impacts are a major problem with droughts. Although Australian native plants and animals are both well adapted to dry temperatures, adequate water is necessary for survival. Fish in both freshwater and saltwater lakes and rivers would be impacted, both by increased salt levels in the water and by dropping water levels. Insects also require water for survival, especially in larval form. Droughts may cause a drastic drop in numbers of animals such as frogs and most species of bird. The lack of water also induces a risk of bushfires, especially in a country like Australia, with highly flammable eucalyptus trees and dense underbrush. Both economic and environmental impacts of drought cause social impacts that can last even after a drought is over. These include health effects of stress and heat, and for some, the emotional stress of businesses affected by droughts. Farmers fall into the latter category. Droughts are a major cause of suicide by farmers and others who work in the agriculture industry. Droughts can also bring about anxiety and depression in those living or working in severely affected areas. Losses of some forms of recreational activities, such as swimming and skiing, are also a social impact to be considered. One example of a drought that had many of the impacts that have been previously discussed was the drought of 1991. Extending from 1991 to 1995, it cost over $4 billion to the Australian economy. Around $590 million was spent on drought relief. The areas most affected by the severe drought were Eastern Australia, mainly Queensland. This particular drought was caused by abnormal El Niño occurrences and was the cause of catastrophic bushfires in eastern New South Wales in 1994. Whereas normally the El Niño only lasts for a year or two, this cycle persisted for 5 years, critically affecting the Australian people. Responses to drought vary from country to country. However, Australia is a country in which droughts are common and occur every few years. This means that the government already has some management plans, and individuals and communities already have an idea of what changes will occur and how to adapt to them. In rural areas of Australia, where droughts are much more hazardous as they affect work and produce, there are groups that work in response to droughts. One such group is the Dairy Industry Drought Response Core Group. This group was developed by the Australian Industry Council to coordinate the drought response of manufacturers and industry groups. During times of drought, all of Australia has a responsibility to contribute to the response. Individuals should abide by the regulations put in place by the government. These include water restrictions and tips given by the government to help conserve water. Communities should organise fundraisers and charities to contribute to drought relief. The government themselves should have a ready action plan and funds prepared in case of a natural hazard such as a drought. These are just some of the examples of the responsibilities that must be shouldered by the people of Australia in times of drought.